When do you think they're going to end QE for good?
They will never end QE for good. They will continue because these programs, once they're introduced, they usually keep on going. They may do some cosmetic adjustments, but in my view, within a few years, the asset purchases will be substantially higher than they are today.
That's definitely an interesting point of view, because a lot of the market is pricing in a taper at some point, at least within the next, say, from potentially tomorrow, within the next few months. How do you think the Fed would possibly not back off of its program, but add to it? Do you think the markets could handle that right now?
Well, they will not add it right now, but don't forget, the stock market next March will be in the fifth year of the bull market. The economic recovery, or so-called recovery, by June of next year will be in the fifth year of the recovery. So at some stage, the economy will weaken again, and at that point, the Fed will argue, well, we haven't done enough, we have to do more. I want to say one more thing about the Federal Reserve and bubbles. The Federal Reserve, all of them, could be sitting on a barrel of dynamite and then pouring gasoline on top of it, and then light a cigar with their matches, throw the match into the gasoline, and not notice that there is any danger. That is the state of mind of the professors at the Fed who never worked a single life in business.
Well, it sounds to me like you're outlining a scenario in which the Fed is slightly irresponsible. Is that exactly what you're saying?
They have been irresponsible for at least 20 years by creating one bubble after another and bailing out institutions that should have failed, like LTCM, with the argument that the system would be threatened. And what happened, they created the biggest NASDAQ bubble, the biggest housing bubble, and the biggest bust that came close to the Depression years.
All right, well, let's take this out one step further. Obviously, it's been a big year for the S&P 500. What do you think next year is going to bring? If you think that we're going to add asset purchases, does that send this market going even higher?
Well, who knows? Depending on how much asset purchases they will conduct, the S&P could still rise, but obviously it will not go up forever, and the happy times and the asset inflation will not last forever. Eventually it will come to an end. And in my view, the global economy, instead of strengthening next year, will be weakening. Because I sit here in Asia, I see all the economies are weakening. I'm here in Vietnam. The Vietnamese economy is doing very well, but still, it's not exactly the same it was doing before the crisis happened in 2007.
So what is a bear to do in this scenario? Would you position yourself short going into 2014?
Well, I'm not yet short, but I would look at essentially any rally here in the U.S. market as kind of an opportunity to lighten up on positions. I don't think people should buy stocks. And what we've seen is people sold shares in 2009, 2010, and now with the S&P up from 666 to close to 1,800 at the present time, the high was 1,813, they're now buying stocks.
All right, so
I don't think that this is a very good strategy.
If you're saying that we shouldn't be, or investors shouldn't be buying at this point, then what are they to do? Because it sounds like you're also saying they shouldn't be shorting. So should they be sitting on the sidelines in cash? Should they be buying gold?
Cash, yes. I think the most hated asset at the present time is cash. And I agree with the Fed's policy. Cash loses purchasing power.
Absolutely. How could you sit in cash when the market is on fire and interest rates are so low?
Well, you say the market is on fire. I can tell you just three stocks: Intel, Cisco, IBM, all lower than in 2011. It depended whether you were in Facebook and Twitter Not everybody owns Facebook and Twitter.
So let me talk about some of the other asset classes out there aside from equities. When we're talking about bonds, for example, when we're talking about gold, is there anything else out there that you like? Is there anywhere else you'd put your money in 2014?
Well, basically, of all the asset classes that I look at, real estate, equities, bonds, commodities, and so forth, the one that stands out as being extremely depressed is the precious metal sector, and in particular, precious metal equities. They are truly depressed. Now, I'm not arguing that they will go up straight away, but if money printing continues, and I think the Fed and other central banks will continue their insane policies, thinking that with money printing you can enrich the world. If that was the case, we should all be on the beach and each has a money printing machine and we all be living extremely well. But you work and I work and most of your viewers work. So money printing doesn't create wealth, but that's what the Fed thinks.
Jim, your question for Mark Faber.
Mark, over the last month, it has definitely seemed to me that the numbers have increased and numbers have gotten better. Do you acknowledge that this is true? Do you think it's a blip, or do you think it's a chance that the economy really does getting traction, and perhaps at the same time the Fed stays irresponsible or increases?
Well, maybe in the U.S. the numbers look somewhat better, but we also have to look at who publishes the numbers. It's the government. But I can tell you that globally, the numbers haven't gotten much better. In fact, they have rather deteriorated. And since the emerging economies are more than 50% of the global economy, I would pay attention to that. And the Chinese numbers for sure haven't gotten any better.
Mark, before we let you go, how far do you think the S&P could fall next year?
Well, I mean, we had a huge run from the lows in 2009, and in October 2011, in other words, a little bit more than 2 years ago, the S&P was at 1,074. We're at 1,800, so we're up almost 70%. I think we will go up until it's over, and it will be over. And I wrongly predicted a 20% correction. It hasn't happened. But I think when it's over, it will be more than 20%.
All right.